We are delighted to be bringing you this webinar today. This is your pre-departure briefing about your upcoming Northwest Passage expedition with Hurtigruten Expeditions. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to the first of your three guest speakers today, Karen Strand. She's the Vice President of Expeditions Development. Karen, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lee, for that introduction, and Christina to do the translation. Very glad to be able to do this webinar with and for you all, together with the excellent two colleagues I have on the side here, Torstein and Christina. So we're going to introduce each other. So I have the happy task to introduce Torstein. Torstein is a fellow Norwegian. We are both from Norway. He comes from Trondheim, one of our larger cities in Norway. Very beautiful. I'm sure he concurs. And he has a long career in Hurtigruten. He started in 2009 already as expedition leader along the Norwegian coast, which he knows very, very well. And then he moved over to this portion of the company in 2021 and has been expedition leader in Hurtigruten Expeditions ever since. His background is in service and in hospitality, which means that Torstein has his task cut out for him by giving good experiences to all of you who wants to be guests on board one of our ships. And it is, I think I'll dare to say it, Torstein, I think it is your passion, one of your passions.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the introduction, Karen. It's my pleasure to be part of this webinar and introduce you to one of my absolute favorite destinations. And I will also introduce you to my colleague, Christina. Christina is an Arctic biologist and specializes in plant ecology. She is German, but has spent the last 10 years mostly in Finland and Norway, with several years living and working on Svalbard before deciding to go to sea. For the past year, she was one of our science and education coordinators. Recently, she took the role of head of guest learning and focuses on developing an outstanding science and education program for the guests on board our ships.
Thank you, Torstein. And last but not least, I have the honor to introduce you properly to Karen. She has started in expedition travel already in 2002, and where she was acting as both a chief purser and an expedition leader on her very first adventure to Chile and Antarctica. Since then, a lot has happened, and she became one of the world's most experienced explorers and pioneers in expedition travel. She is also the godmother to the world's first hybrid-powered cruise ship, the MS Roald Amundsen, and she also has the chair of the IECO's executive committee, and IECO is the Association of Arctic Expedition Cruise Operators. And now back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Christina. I didn't know you knew that much. Well, it's a good what we can read, but thank you ever so much, both of you. It's so nice to be able to do this. I'm just going to quickly go through the agenda with you all. We're going to go through now an overview of the expedition together with Torstein. Then he will continue with a bit of clothing and equipment, and then Christina takes over with the wildlife and the science and the education. And then we will share a little bit along as we go with excursions and activities and practical information. And then you will have the chance to do a Q&A, which is a very important part of this. So we're going to try to speed through this so that you can get to the questions. So without further ado, Torstein, take it away with the overview of the expedition.
Thank you very much, Karen. So I will take a quick overview of the different itineraries that we have in the Northwest Passage this year. We have our three ships, Fram, Fridtjof Nansen, and Amundsen. For Fram, you see the two different itineraries here, one starting in Reykjavik, Iceland, and ending in Cambridge Bay, and one starting in Cambridge Bay, then going through the Northwest Passage to Greenland and ending in Boston. For both of these itineraries, you have some sea days in between Greenland and Canada. And also when you start in Reykjavik, you have 2 sea days over to Greenland. The sea days are perfect to get more information from the expedition team and learn about the areas you are going to visit. And also, of course, after you have visited the Northwest Passage going down to Canada, you can reflect on what you have experienced. In Greenland, you will have some ports that are alongside, so it is a gangway on the shore and easy to get in and out, but also some parts where you will use the tender boats, the Zodiacs, to get ashore. When you come into Arctic Canada, there will be only Zodiac tendering when you are going ashore, and also, of course, when we have our nature landings. For those traveling on Amundsen, on the eastbound voyage, in the wake of the great explorers, you start in Nome, Alaska, and you start with 4 sea days before you enter the Northwest Passage. On these 4 sea days, you will have a ton of information from the expedition team on board, and also the local ambassadors from the Northwest Passage in Arctic Canada that will join you on the trip. For Nansen, on the westbound voyage, we start in Reykjavik. We have 2 sea days over to Greenland before we move over to Arctic Canada. And on this itinerary, we end with 4 sea days before we arrive in Alaska. We will have a lot of nature landings and small boat cruisings in this region, but you are also traveling in the homeland of the Inuit of Arctic Canada. They started crossing the Bering Strait around 15 to 20,000 years ago, and it is different populations of Inuit that reside in this area, and you will get a thorough insight in the history and the culture of the Inuit of Arctic Canada. All the ships will attempt to visit these 3 communities, Cambridge Bay, Pond Inlet, and Joe Haven. And for Nansen and Amundsen, we also aim to visit the village of Ulukhaktok. On board our vessels, we are very proud to have local ambassadors that come from different communities in Arctic Canada, and they will be available on board. You can chat with them and they will give different presentations. So on the next slide, Karin, you will see these different communities that we will visit. And these local ambassadors, they differ in age and background and have an extensive knowledge about everything to do with the culture and community of the area. I strongly recommend to interact with them and ask them questions. They are very willing to share their information and knowledge about their culture and community. And you will hear about the Inuit languages. Inuktitut is the main language spoken in Nunavut, but you have several different Inuit languages and dialects. You will also hear about the land claim agreements, the residential schools, and also their wonderful connection to the nature around them, and also their communities, how they support each other and how they have survived in this region for thousands of years is extremely interesting and fantastic to hear. There will be strong and powerful stories from these local ambassadors, which will change, I think, the way you view Arctic Canada. And then, Karin, you can talk about the ships.
Then we can go to the ships, exactly. So the itineraries that Torstein has gone through are catered by 3 ships. So the ship that is going to take those of you who are going to start in Reykjavik, who's going to go east to west and do the full transit of, attempt a full transit of the Northwest Passage, is the MS Fridtjof Nansen. Newest ship in the fleet and a hybrid vessel, and has been mostly only in operation since after COVID. So it's a very new and very, very good ship. We will then have, when you look in the middle there, you have the good MS Fram, who will do a partial portion of the Northwest Passage, starting in Reykjavik and in Cambridge Bay, depending whether you are doing east-west or west-east, and being the ship that will do those 2 voyages during the short season that is possible to be in the Northwest Passage. And then the one starting in the very west, in Nome, will be MS Roald Amundsen, sister ship of MS Fridtjof, the first of the two. So just before COVID, we managed to get her out of the yard and start operating a season in Antarctica, and have been operating in this region and doing, I think it's the third year that they are attempting to go through the Northwest Passage west to east. So that's the three ships that you have either booked your voyages on one of them. I will now take you a little bit through why I said the word attempt. Northwest Passage is a fabled passage, meaning a passage that until a few decades ago or even less have been very, very difficult to transit through. It has changed slightly over the years. There is now more possibilities to go through the Northwest Passage, and we see that by more transits being done. However, there is a chance every single year, like any voyage in a polar region of this kind, that ice might stop a full transit or only being able to do parts of it. If that is going to be the case in this year, we don't really know until we get somewhere around end of July towards August, when the breakup of the ice in the passage area in both Northwest Territories and in the Nunavut region will be clear. So I'm just going to show you two ice charts now, which is how the conditions are right now. So everything that's kind of dark grayish is fast ice, which means that there is no breakup in the ice concentration at all. It's fast ice connected to land. Then you have the red portions, which is what we call 9 to 10 out of 10. So that is closed pack ice. It means it's not fast ice, so it has broken up, but it is very closed pack ice. And the orange is then a little bit less thick, but yellow and green and blue is then diminishing in concentration of ice. So you can see that large portions of the Northwest Passage now, this is on the east coast. So you could see Greenland, and you can see Ellesmere Island on the very top there where you see Eureka. I made an arrow. I don't know if it's very easy to see, but I made an arrow towards a known kind of spot, which is Resolute, which is in the Lancaster Sound, which is one of the sounds that you are likely to transit through. Either you're coming east or you're coming from west. And you can see that Lancaster Sound, where Resolute is, going through a little bit of blue area, green, orange, and red, still has a lot of ice in it. But there are breaking of ice coming in droves right now. It happens very quickly. Within 3 to 4 weeks, in July and August, we will be able to see a pattern of how the ice conditions are going to be. 2018 was almost impossible. Nobody were able to venture through. 2019, possible again. And same in 2022 and 2023. But you could get an anomaly year where you have an issue. So that's why we always do say that if you book a voyage in the Northwest Passage, the excitement is ice. And ice is nice, but ice can also stop us in that sense. But then we will find opportunities to do activities around the ice. But then we will have a plan for what we do in case that is there. But that is way too early to say right now. All we can say right now is that the opportunistic way of going through the Northwest Passage right now is that we have to wait until July and August to see the trends. So this is on the western side. So this is more in the Northwest Territory side. You can still see the common denominator on both maps. I made a long arrow up to Resolute, which is the same spot as you saw on the other map, where you also see that there are high concentrations of red and dark gray, so there's still a lot of fast ice in the, which is expected. It's supposed to be like that at this stage of the year. Torstein, take it away with clothing and equipment.
Clothing and equipment. So we always get, of course, the questions, what should you bring when you're going through the Northwest Passage? Answer is prepare for almost everything. We will, of course, give you an HX shell jacket that we provide you when you come on board as a waterproof outer layer. It can be good to bring an extra jacket if you want a lighter one. You also need wind and water resistant trousers. On the Zodiacs, which we will be using for most of this voyage, then it is always, even on a sunny day, a bit of water spray. So waterproof trousers for all outings is essential so you do not get wet and cold. Long thermal underwear and top wool is recommended, and also here I do recommend to have one that is a bit thinner and one layer that is a bit thicker for those colder days. Warm hat, cap or headband. Here as well, it is good to have one woolen thick one and maybe one lighter one for warmer days. Also gloves. I do recommend a lighter glove and waterproof gloves, which is good to have if it rains a little bit and you are going out on a small boat cruising or landing. Scarf or fleece tube or buff is always handy so that you can pull it a bit up over your face when you are traveling on small boats and the wind is a bit cold. Warm socks, and plenty of them, also thick woolen socks. Swimwear is, of course, essential to use the jacuzzi and pool on board. And also when you want to do the polar plunge somewhere in the Northwest Passage. Sunglasses and sunscreen with high factor. Also a sun lip balm with UV protection is good to have. Extra batteries for your camera, of course. Comfortable flat shoes for use on board. Do make sure that they have a good grip. If it is wet out on deck, it can be a bit slippery, so good grip on the shoes that you wear on board as well. An adapter for European power outlets type C plug. And we always recommend to have a small backpack, 20 liters, and a small waterproof bag to have your belongings in. We will provide you with rubber boots that you find on the next slide. And these rubber boots are mandatory to use on nature landings in Arctic and Antarctic and in the Northwest Passage, also when we do settlement visits. We have sizes from 32 to 50, European sizes, excuse me, and we will also have the conversion table posted in the chat where you will see what these sizes are in UK and US sizes. These rubber boots you will keep for the duration of the voyage, and because of biosecurity, which Karen will talk more about, they are meticulously cleaned before and during the expedition. When you are in Greenland, and for those coming from Cambridge Bay and with Amundsen in Newfoundland on the east coast of Canada, there might be some hikes that the expedition team offer where it is not mandatory to wear the rubber boots. So we do also recommend to bring a pair of hiking boots on the voyage if you are interested in going hiking with us. A note on the hiking boots, they need to be sturdy boots with a very good anti-slip sole, a good grip and waterproof. And we do recommend hiking boots with the ankle support. You can have lower hiking boots as you see to the right on the picture, down on the right on the picture, but it is best if they have ankle support when you are walking up on uneven ground. For the rubber boots, especially if you have any questions about sizes, or if you have any orthopedic soles that you need to wear, you can contact us on the hiking boots, on the rubber boots, and see if this fits you or if you want to bring your own. Just A note that they need to be quite high, as the rubber boots that you saw on the last slide, because you will be stepping in a bit of water when we do our nature landing. And then one of the most important gadgets, Christina.
Thank you, Thorstein. Yes, so we highly recommend to bring a pair of binoculars. On board, you will have the opportunity to join our deck watches, or also called wildlife watches, and the binoculars will come very handy here to enhance your experience. And if you want to bring an identification guide along, we recommend these two you can see now on the right-hand side. First, the Arctic Guide. It is a good general guide that includes over 800 species of mammals, birds, fishes, butterflies, and also some plants. And the Handbook of Whales, Dolphins, and Porpoises focuses, as you can already guess, more on marine mammals. So these ones are the go-to guides if you want to do some pre-reading. As we get many questions about the right binoculars, there is no real right or wrong. I mean, there is a better and good one, basically. But before buying new ones, bring the ones you've got home and feel comfortable using. However, the best magnification for bird watching is 8 times or 10 times. Any weaker and you'll probably have trouble locating or tracking birds, and anything higher will make it difficult to get a steady view. The best objective lens size is the second number on your binoculars. It falls between 32 millimeters and 42 millimeters. And this range strikes a balance between the brightness and also the portability. This makes it easy to carry around and also use it for extended periods of time without causing you eye fatigue. Our recommendation is therefore 8 times 32 or 8 times 42. But as mentioned before, you can also use the 10 times. And now I'm going to introduce you to some wildlife you might see during our trip, and also our science and education program. I will start off with the polar bears because that's the animals, the marine mammals we all hope to see. But as nature is unpredictable, and also these are wild animals and they're not active all day long, so we cannot promise that we will see them during the trip. I can only recommend spending as much time as possible on deck with your binoculars, and maybe we'll be lucky enough to spot one of them in the distance. In the whole Arctic, there are many animals, and one of them is the Arctic fox you can see usually on land, and also the walrus you can sometimes spot in the waters, and hopefully we will see some whales. Here we have a picture of a humpback whale, but there are also whales like the North Pacific and the North Atlantic whales. We have also several plankton that we might see in the water. It is not visible by bare eyes, but we can take some samples together with you in our science boats, and then you will have the opportunity to watch these samples through our microscopes, and then you can see this life in bigger size. On the left-hand upper corner, you can see an amphipod. Then on the down, like the bottom corner left, is diatoms. This is a type of phytoplankton we usually can see in the waters through the microscope, of course. And then in the bottom center, you can see a pteropod, which is also called the sea butterfly. And on the next page, you can see the birds. Of all wildlife, birds will be the most of what we see during the voyages, especially in the Northwest Passage. Birds are an excellent indicator of the subtle habitat transitions, and they're indicators of the broader environmental change, something the ornithologists on board will also talk a lot about. The short-tailed shearwater you can see here in the bottom center picture. This can only be spotted on the first few days leaving the Pacific Arctic. When you go from the Pacific to the Atlantic, if you go the other way around, of course, this is a different voyage then. So if you go then further to the high Arctic ecosystem in direction of Nunavut, here the bird life will be totally different. And there are also certain indicator species that will make it clear we've crossed from one region into another. And eventually when we come to the eastern side of the province, we go back into open water, and then we will see birds like the black-legged kittiwake that you can see in the upper right corner, or the northern fulmar that you can see in the upper left corner. And now it's time to introduce you to the first app that is a must-have for all bird lovers among you. It's called the Merlin app, as you can see here. And some of you might already know this, but anyone wanting to learn more about birds should really install the Merlin app. It allows you to get lists of birds to see in a certain region and even identify them by sound. That means you take a recording and then the app shows you which birds are around and are singing or chatting. It's very cool if you try it. It offers you to download region-specific packages, and for the Northwest Passage, there is no specific package, but the packages you would need is the Atlantic Ocean package, as well as the US and Canada package. And then we come to some plants. In the whole of the Arctic, there are around 400 seed-bearing plants, and as it is already quite late in the season when we are in the Northwest Passage, it will be quite difficult to spot plant life. I can already tell you this. So most landing sites will be truly barren, but some plants are still flowering. And if you look very closely, then you might see an Arctic poppy. You can see it here on the right side. They're really beautiful. Or you can see a bearing mouse-eared chickweed hiding behind some rocks, or the Arctic bladderpot, for example. If you're interested in mosses and lichens, there are many interesting species to be found year-round, like Peltigera or Cladonia. Yes, next slide, please. As part of our science and education program, we also support a number of citizen science projects, and you can contribute to these by participating in sessions led by our experts, as you can see here on these pictures. They will guide you on how to contribute to the data collections in remote areas, because researchers can rarely go there. It's very expensive to hire a big ship to go there, so it's easier to use our ships as platforms, and we are lacking some information for decision making in these areas, so we contribute to get more information for these decisions. On the pictures here, you can see on the left-hand side the globe cloud observation. That is basically a session where we identify and record clouds on deck our ship. Here you can see some people who look at the clouds and have the cloud ID chart in their hands. The picture on the right-hand side and in the middle shows a guest taking a Secchi disc measurement in one of our science boats. With the Secchi disc, we usually measure the turbidity of the water, which can be an indicator of presence or absence of plankton. The science boat is an activity you can sign up for on board, so you cannot pre-book it. You have to be on board and then you can sign up the list, and our experts will take you out in a small boat, as you can see on the right-hand side, to collect some plankton, and you will also take a temperature profile of the water column. Later, back in the Science Center, you will then have the opportunity to have a look at all of your samples through the microscopes. And here, if you're interested in participating in one of the citizen science projects, we have several projects we support. We show you now 2 slides, which include some QR codes. And these are apps you can download in advance to prepare for the trip and learn more about the projects that we do support. To give you a heads up, the internet, although it is available, it can be patchy and bandwidth may not be enough to download any applications. So eBird, iNaturalist, and also the NATHA Globe Cloud Observer are good apps to have and start with. And the QR codes will either take you to the App Store, so you can download them in advance and be ready to go and get familiarized with these apps, or it will lead you to a web page where you can learn more about the Happy Whale project, for example. These pictures will also be sent into the chat, so you don't have to be fast now. I know it can be quite tricky during a presentation to get the mobile phone up and scan the code, so these will be later in the chat, that you have enough time to download these. And just a quick note, a personal note, My favorite app is the iNaturalist app. I don't only use it during cruises, but also at home. This is an app you can upload pictures of any species and save it with a GPS position and also a date in your private sightings. And if you don't know which animal or plant you found, the community of the app will help you with the identification, and later you will have an overview of the sightings during your trip. Very cool. So I really recommend downloading iNaturalist. Last but not least, if you're interested in recording and communicating significant environmental and ecological events to empower remote communities that are also dealing with the effects of climate change, then you want to go for the ISN Citizen Sentinel app. This is especially for the Northwest Passage. So that's a very nice app to record any environmental and ecological events.
That's the last app on this page, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. And now back to
it's
you.
the brown one. Back to, I think we have Torstein doing next.
That is me. I will mention a bit about the excursions and activities during the voyage. On the next slide here, you will see the activities that is, of course, included for everyone. For our small boat cruisings, nature landings, and also community visits in the Northwest Passage. This is included for everyone. You do not need to sign up. You will be divided in different boat groups or animal groups when you come on board, and then the expedition team will let you know when you go out on the different days. Also, we will, of course, have ship cruising. We can go into fjords, into narrow passages, and we have wildlife watch on board. The expedition team will constantly, almost 24 hours, be outside and help you to spot wildlife in these areas and talk about not only the wildlife, but also, of course, the geology of the area. Then we have some optional activities on the next slide that you can sign up for when you are on board.
I'm trying. There we go. Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry,
And that is the hikes that we can offer in some places. And these will be decided at the beginning or during the voyage, depending on the conditions of the areas. And the same for kayaking. You can sign up for kayaking at the beginning of the voyage, and then we take kayak groups out as often as we can, depending on the condition. We, of course, have a photographer on board that is around every day, helping you to document your voyage, and pictures from the photographer will also be shared with all guests after the voyage in our logbook. He will also have different workshops and lectures, and here there might also be some sessions with the photographer that you can sign up for on board. Then we also have some excursions. In the Northwest Passage in Arctic Canada, it is community visits, nature landings, and small boat cruisings that is offered. But for Greenland and Newfoundland especially, you will see on our websites that there are some excursions that you can book extra. You have one activity or excursion included every day, but you also have some optional excursions in Greenland and in Newfoundland that you can add on to your experience. So I do recommend to take a look on the website for your voyage and see which excursions are available. And you can book them in advance, and I recommend booking it in advance as some of them have limited capacity. And then, of course, we have an extensive onboard program, Christina.
Yes, as much there is to explore off the ship, as Torstein just mentioned, there are also many things to learn on board. We offer, for example, daily wildlife watches from the outside deck and many interesting onboard lectures. We have many experts on board, and we also invite you to stop by our science center and have a chat with our experts on different topics, or take a look through one of the microscopes, whatever you like most. Everything that happens throughout the trip will be informed to you during the briefings. For example, information about the landings, the cruising, and most important, of course, the safety. This information will also be provided in the daily program, including the on-deck guiding and wildlife spotting sessions, the timings of the lecture program, and also the activities in the Science Center. So be sure to check the daily program. You can also check this out through the HX app that you will be using on board. And of course, everything you experience will of course be guided by our experts on board. You can always ask anyone who is around, like everyone is always approachable. So that means if you have any doubts or questions, be sure to ask one of our expedition team members on board. Then some practical information.
Yep, practical coming. For some reason, my computer is starting to play on me here. There we go. Finally.
Yes.
Here we go.
Now I give you an overview of some practical information. Canada is a bilingual country with English and French as main languages. Territorial, both the Northwest Territories and Nunavut have official indigenous languages as well, alongside French and English. One of them is Inuktitut in Nunavut and also the Northwest Territories, but there are also 9 other indigenous languages. The currency on shore is Canadian dollars, and foreign currencies may be exchanged into local currencies at banks, but as you can already guess, there are not many banks around, so make sure to exchange your money before your voyage. There are some places that do accept card payments. However, it is advisable to bring cash in Canadian dollars and, if possible, in smaller bills to buy some local handcraft or souvenirs. The weather, as everywhere in the Arctic, is quite unpredictable. As Torstein already said during the packing list, like, be prepared. The average temperature in summer is -5 to 5 degrees Celsius, and it's 23 to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite these relatively low average temperatures, the dry air means that the temperature will feel warmer. So as we are in the Arctic, the weather is unpredictable, so you can have all the seasons in one day. It may vary between sun, fog, low clouds, and also rain. So just make sure you have enough clothing with you.
And wind.
Yes, and wind as well, of course. We do have Wi-Fi, we have Starlink, but unfortunately the connection can be patchy and weak because we are in very remote areas. It doesn't allow for streaming, but it's always good to keep connected. And WhatsApp usually works, so that is the main thing that you can use the internet for when you're very far out, to keep messaging. Now to you, Karin.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. I will now take you through a little bit around avian flu. If you haven't heard about that, this is a disease that has spread both in the northern and the southern hemisphere over the last year, attacking both marine mammals and birds. And we try the best we can in these vulnerable ecosystems to not spread avian flu. So that means that we need to keep a little bit of a rigid cleaning regime, like Torstein mentioned, around the boots. And that's why also the boots are a good way of footwear, not just because you're stepping into water, because I mean, that's primary reason number one, of course, so you'll not get wet. But this is also a reason that you can clean these rubber boots very, very well, and also then being able to disinfect them. So we have disinfectant on board that we will put on you step into a bath with some disinfectant in it, and then it has to dry on the boot to actually be effective, so that by the time you go on the next site, we are sure to not spread biomaterial from one site to the other, or from home to this very fragile environment that you are all so lucky to be able to see and visit. This also goes for the beginning of the voyage, where we will encourage you to also clean your gear that Torstein mentioned to you, which you bring from home. So gloves, and also look at tripods, that we don't bring garden material with us in our pockets or whatever we are doing. And Velcros are very good little glue infestors, so to speak. There are things sticking to Velcro that is hard to get off. So we will offer opportunity for you to vacuum these things and also assist you in how to do it. We are very well trained to do this. Both we do it in the Northern Hemisphere and in the Southern Hemisphere. This is part of us being an IECO member, which shows responsible tourism in the Arctic, not spreading the alien species into or diseases into vulnerable environments. So very happy if you play along with that with us. We're very, very grateful for that. Then we have maybe the most boring topic of the whole webinar, so sorry, but the entry requirements are essential. It's important that we get it right so that you can actually get on the ship. What is a universal item that everybody needs to bring, independent of nationality, is your passport. You will have to have a passport independent of nationality to be traveling with us. Now, there will be 3 countries that some of you, depending on your itinerary, will be passing by or coming into. Some will only have 2. But I'm going to go through all 3 countries that the 3 ships will pass through, and then you adjust it to your itinerary. So all of these countries will not apply for all of you. For example, From will not have the US on this itinerary. So, but Nansen, Amundsen will, and Nansen will. So for Canada, there is for most nationalities, I looked through all the booking lists and see who have booked, and most nationalities that have booked with us are travelers who need an ETA. An ETA is a visa-free notification or application of a visa light, so to speak, for those traveling to Canada. But this is if you arrive to Canada via an airport. You can see this is from the official page in Canada. If you come by car, bus, train, or boat, you do not need an ETA. So it means that if you enter the ship in the US and you are entering Canada through the vessel, you per definition do not need your ETA. If you are going to Canada right after you have disembarked or whatever, you will, and you're going to fly in, you will need it to have it. It's a validity of 5 years. I just put it in there just so you have it and which countries the ETA do apply for. For the US, for those of you who are joining the ship in the US, these countries to the right are eligible to enter the country through an ESTA, also a visa light process, to be done at least 72 hours prior and have a validity of 2 years. There's a little fee, but it's somewhere around $14 to $20 in that area. Not a big fee, but is applicable for air and ship, and whatever way you enter the US, you will need the ESTA if you are on the list of countries on the right side. If you're not on the list on the right side, then you need a visa and you need to go and have a look at your country's visa application procedures to be able to enter into the US before you board the ship. And then once you are on board, many of you will be touching by Greenland on your way. And going to Greenland is for many nations visa free. So I've put up a list of all the nations that can enter Greenland without a visa. If your country is not on this list, then please go and get your visa for Greenland to be able to travel to Greenland on board the vessel. I think I'll let it over to you, Christina, again for medical information.
Yes, some general health information. In case of a medical emergency in the Northwest Passage, the only means of evacuation is mostly by airplane or helicopter to the nearest town with a hospital. So please note that there is a limited number of medical centers with a resident doctor. There is one general hospital in Iqaluit and 2 regional health centers in Cambridge Bay and Rankin Inlet. So this is just an FYI. but it's very expensive to be flown out and also very dependent on weather conditions. Therefore, it is advisable to have a comprehensive travel health insurance policy. So please check your insurance if it covers also transportation by helicopter or airplane. We recommend that you bring your medication if you need any, and also maybe a bit more than needed in your hand luggage and not in the checked-in luggage in case your suitcase is lost. If you know that you are prone to seasickness or you're not sure how you will react, if this is the first time for you on a ship, you probably don't know if you react to rough seas, we recommend that you bring seasickness medication along, especially if you know which one works best for you, because some people know that there is only one medication that works for them. Others, they don't really mind which medication they take. We also have some medication on board that you can get from the reception, but it's always better to bring your own.
Very good. Thank you. Then Torstein, I think it's flying time.
Yes, this flying time. So for the flight details and documentation, you of course should have received your booking confirmation, and about 30 days before your sailing starts, you will receive all your travel documentation with detailed information on booked hotel, transfers, meet and greet staff on site, and also contacts during your arrival or departure. And of course, we will have at the end here, we will have the emails for the different markets. So if you have any questions about your booking details, you can, of course, reach out to us. Mm-hmm. And then we have also compiled a bit of reading and music, Christina.
This is the fun part. This is the fun part of this. So, Christina, would you say something about the music or the books? And
yes. So I created a QR code which leads you to Spotify. It's a Spotify link, and there is a music list for some music that brings you to the Northwest Passage already. So that means you can already dive into the feeling of going on the waves, basically, in the Northwest Passage. And then we also prepared some reading here. This is just a recommendation. There is so many books on the Northwest Passage. So if you find more reading material, don't let us stop you. This is only a recommendation from us, but it's always good to get some history background and also some background on the mammals you will see, or the wildlife in general, marine mammals, also terrestrial mammals. So whatever you find on guides, it's always nice to be a little bit prepared. We also have, of course, experts on board, but it's always nice if we have some background knowledge to have discussions on board and see where this leads you.
Yeah. And I'll just, I chose these books because I have them and I've read them all, and that's why I felt very comfortable to kind of recommend them all in one. I mean, you can't go to the Northwest Passage without, saying something about Franklin. I mean, Franklin and the, right? I mean, guys, so there is so much literature on Franklin. So I just took 3 books with different perspectives. So if you look at the one that is called May We Be Spared to Meet on Earth, isn't that title absolutely lovely, guys? I mean, May We Be Spared to Meet on Earth. It's a collection of letters that brings the members of the Franklin expedition a little bit to life. You see them coming and going and a little bit of that. So it brings that fatal journey to a little bit to life. Then the one that is called The Unraveling of the Franklin Mystery takes the Inuit perspective, their tales and their perspectives on what happened, what did actually go from their side, what went wrong and why. So I think I really loved reading that perspective as well. And then Potter, Mr. Potter, I've read a number of books about him about the Franklin expedition, because he knows, I would say he is one of the experts on the Franklin tale, I would say. even, and he knows everything about it. So I would, just for the factual part of the Franklin expedition, Potter is good, just if you're a fact freak and you like that. And then, I mean, Torstein, we cannot be Norwegians and not mention Fridtjof Nansen and Amundsen. And you guys are going to travel on either Amundsen or Nansen if you're doing a full transit as well. So it is fitting that Farthest North or the Gjøa expeditions with Roald Amundsen is part of this reading list. And then I took a little bit of an anomaly there, which is called the Takak Split. This is a Canadian artist. It's a novel. It's the only novel I have in there with the perspective from a Canadian musician. Her name is Tanya Takak, and she grew up in the Canadian Arctic in the 1970s. And this is her perspective on that. I thought it was very moving and interesting. And then if you are a politic freak like me, then you like to know what is behind the politics in this region. So I did put in a Rethinking Political Culture, which is taken with extended fieldwork and quantitative analysis. It is actually the first really good empirical study of the political life in Nunavut and the evolving nature of, and this is what I liked about it, of the self-governing that has come into the region, and also shedding life a little between the Inuit and the non-Inuit relations. Loved it. So, guys, if you want to have something to read on sea days, this is just a little taste. Yes. I think that's it. I think we're going to Q&A, aren't we? Jesse.
And
yes, and we are down to just our last minutes, but I think we have time for one question while we split up. My screens are, we didn't get a whole lot of questions online. You guys have been really comprehensive. So
okay.
A question I do have for you is, what sort of activities can we expect to do on the Alaskan coast?
All right, Torstein, you can take that one.
So for going from Nome and going to Nome along the Alaskan coast, it is sea days. So both ships have 4 sea days to or from Nome before we arrive in Canada and start the Northwest Passage. So here we will have an extensive onboard program. We hope, of course, to see some wildlife on the way. And it is the perfect setting to relax and reflect on the voyage and everything you have learned when you are on the Nansen voyage and have these at the end. And on Amundsen, it is also the fantastic time to get to know the local ambassadors and get really to know the culture before you start with the first community visits in Arctic Canada.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. That was a great answer, Torstein. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Maybe see you on board. Thank you very much.
Have a great voyage
Thank you
in the
very
Northwest
much.
Passage, everyone.
Bye.
Welcome aboard.